Hi everyone, my name is Angela, this is Paperbacks Galore, and today I'm going to talk about all the books I read in May. I read 10 books in May, I DNF'd one book, and my average rating was apparently a 3.4, which is very low for me. So let's get into the books. First up, I read Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. This is the second book in the the Farseer trilogy, which starts with Assassin's Apprentice. We follow Fitz, who is a royal bastard who actually becomes trained to be an assassin. And there's lots of court politics and danger from these other islands that are threatening where Fitz lives. There's also a magic system that's slowly being revealed to us and also to the characters, and this is a sequel with a lot more action and intrigue and betrayal and violence, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I really think the third book is going to be 5 stars, so I'm really hoping to get to that one soon. Next, I read Honey and Spice by Bolu Babalola. This is actually categorized as a work of fiction, even though it's very clearly a romance, so I don't know why they did that, but when you go into a bookstore, it's probably in the fiction section. I kind of get why, because the writing is so good. Bolu Babalola is so clever and sharp and witty, and the writing is so unique. It's very distinctly English, I think, and I listened to the audiobook to help me kind of understand the vibes. Basically, our main character, Kiki, has a radio show at her college in England where she gives relationship advice and advice to women in general, and she calls out this new boy at school named Malachi, and they actually end up fake dating, even though she's publicly told everyone that she thinks he's a player and a bad guy. And I thought this was really fascinating. I really wish this author would publish more books about the side characters, because I really liked being at this college within this community of Black students, and I just want more. So I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it was really good. Next, I read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, and everyone is obsessed with this book. Everyone raves about it, and I thought it was good, fine, okay. This is essentially a novel that really reads like a memoir, in my opinion. It's a letter from the main character to his Vietnamese mother who cannot read. And so it talks a lot about the immigrant experience in America and being queer and growing up without a lot of money. And there's a lot of really beautiful lines, but ultimately I felt like this just wasn't completely for me as someone who prefers novels to poetry, and I felt like as a novel this was a bit lacking for me, even though I really appreciated some of the lines. So mixed feelings, and I felt really bad not giving this a glowing review. I did read this in a vlog, so if you want to check out more of my in-depth thoughts, I will link that down below. Next up, I finished A Disappearance in Fiji by Nalima Rao. This is the first book I've ever read by a Fijian author, and I really wanted to read from a Pacific Islander author because people on Bookstagram were pointing out how those books are really underrepresented in a lot of the recommendations. And this one is a mystery, and I really love mystery novels. So we're basically in Fiji, which was colonized by the British, and so our main character is actually an Indian police officer within the British Imperial Order, and there is a indentured servant on a plantation on the island who has gone missing, and so it's the story of trying to figure out what happened to this woman. I think as a historical fiction novel, I really enjoyed this, but as a mystery novel, I felt like there wasn't really anything mysterious about it. It didn't feel like a regular mystery novel where there's a bunch of suspects and clues and red herrings. There were interviews, but the main character was mostly just accusing the same few people, and nothing was really surprising, so I ended up giving this 3 stars. Again, I really liked the historical fiction aspects and just learning about Fiji and this community and the plantation system and everything, but as a mystery, it was not good. Next, I finished Legendary by Stephanie Garber, which is the second book in the Caraval series, which I very impulsively bought a few years ago. And I'm not a huge YA fantasy fan, but for some reason this series really called out to me, and I definitely want to read her other series that comes after this that everyone raves about, so that's kind of part of why I really want to finish this series. The world of Caraval is inspired by like old-timey Spain. It's this fantastical country, and Caraval is a game filled with magic and intrigue, and you never know what's real and what's part of the game. And obviously this is the second book, so I can't say much, but I enjoyed this. It was a fun, whimsy, kind of nostalgic time. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I'm actually reading the third one right now. I don't know, something about this just reminds me of being a young teen and reading fantasy books and just having a fun, silly time. Next up, we have a book that I really ranted about in my last vlog, and that is Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. I think this book is really bad. I gave it 2 stars. It's basically one of those stories where two people meet for a short period of time when they're younger and then kind of serendipitously meet again when they're older. And in this case, these two people meet on a vacation in London, and then later the girl is an actress and the boy is a writer, and they're working on this movie together, and they hate each other. Well, she hates him because he basically did her dirty. And I really hated this book. I thought it was awful. There was nothing romantic about it. Go watch my rant in my vlog. I thought it was fun to rant about. 2 stars. It was an easy time. I got through it, so I gave it 2 stars instead of 1 star. Nothing was like extremely offensive, but this was not good. Next up is a fantasy book that I buddy read with my friend Sarah, and it's Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This is based off of Chinese mythology, and our main character is the daughter of the Moon Goddess. At the beginning of the story, she kind of gets separated from her mother. She ends up kind of in a different part of this fantastical world that she's unfamiliar with. She has to hide her true identity, and she becomes like a servant, and then she quickly actually becomes kind of the companion of the prince and gets to learn alongside him, and she learns archery and she's educated, and eventually she fights in the Imperial Army. This was confusing. Not that the book was confusing, but my thoughts on it are confusing, because on the one hand, I think the imagery in this book was so beautiful. They literally travel on clouds, which is something that I have been wanting in a fantasy book for so long, like cloud magic and like kingdoms on clouds in the sky. But I thought the character work was kind of abysmal. Like, this character is just kind of a cardboard cutout, and because of that, I felt like a lot of this story kind of felt like a summary of a story rather than something that you're actually really invested in and feeling. These characters were all so flat. Sometimes the writing was very strange, but again, the imagery and some of the fantastical elements were so cool. So 3 stars, very, very mixed feelings. I'm not gonna read the sequel, but I'm glad I read it, and it's a beautiful book, so I will be keeping this probably forever. Next is a fantasy book that I did not imagine that I would ever give 2.5 stars to, just because of how much this author is like critically acclaimed and beloved. But this is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. I think my main problem with this book is I don't really like quirky, funny, absurd fantasy, and I feel like there's a few British authors who do this. Like, there's a book that I read in college that gave me similar feelings that I just really hated. This is essentially a book set in the 90s in London, and our main character, Richard, discovers, is his name Richard? Yeah, Richard discovers that there is kind of this second London underground filled with these really quirky, weird, dangerous, strange characters. And I think Neil Gaiman absolutely accomplished what he wanted to accomplish with this book. This book is absolutely gonna work for some people, but for me, I just didn't like it. I wanted more magic and world building. It was just, it felt like a bad dream. So if you want a book that feels like a bad dream, read this. I personally don't like books that feel like that. I am more of a high fantasy with an established magic system kind of girl. So 2.5 stars. Sorry, Neil, but this one was not for moi. Next up was a success. It's Beautiful Country by Chan Julie Wong. I read this while also listening to the audiobook, and the author herself narrates it. This is a memoir talking about her experience as an undocumented Chinese immigrant in New York City in the 90s and I think the early noughties as well. I thought that this was very well written. This is really focusing on her childhood, so it's not giving you like a full picture of her entire life up to now, which is fine because memoirs are supposed to have some sort of central theme to it. It's not supposed to be like your entire life necessarily. And I think Julie Wong is a very talented writer. She's actually a lawyer as well, so she is just super fucking smart. She did such a wonderful job. I felt everything she felt. I could really envision everything. She has a great memory, by the way, to remember all of these details and to be able to express them on the page the way that she did. So this was obviously really sad and difficult to read at times, but also I think she really captured her like childlike mind and all of the innocence and the wonder and the naivete of being a kid, and it was just kind of sweet and sad at the same time. Highly recommend listening to this. I thought she did a really great job, and this was definitely one of my highlights of the month. Next up is a romance book that I randomly listened to on Everend, and it's Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane. This is a sapphic romance between two women who are both teachers at the same school in their hometown. They are actually childhood friends who fell out at some point, and they've pretty much hated each other for like a long time now, but they both have a really close relationship with their former high school English teacher named Jo. Jo was the only openly queer, openly gay teacher at their conservative high school in their conservative town, and they both really loved him, and they still obviously keep very close contact with him. And Jo is very sadly dying of cancer, and he only has a few months to live, and he decides that he wants to go on a road trip from Washington, where they live, to Maine, where he has a cottage, and he wants to spend his last days there, but on the way he wants to see the country. And of course he wants our main characters, Rosemary and Logan, to take him. And obviously they're a bit reluctant to do this because it's going to be really hard. He needs a lot of care. He can't really do a lot of things by himself, and also these two women hate each other. This was so well written. This was so sweet and emotional and funny. I thought the writing was amazing. There's only one small thing that I thought was like, I don't mind it. I think people might mind it. Logan, whenever she cusses, she'll be like, Demi fucking Lovato, or like, Haley Kiyoko, that's crazy. Which I know people complain about, but if you can get past that, this book is so good. I really loved this. The characters are so detailed and well crafted. They're definitely not like stock characters, cardboard cutout romance characters. I think Alison Cochrane is such a talented writer, and I'm going to keep reading her books, and I gave this one 4.5 stars, not quite a 5, didn't have any 5s this month, but this was probably my second favorite of the month. And then I did DNF Howard's End by Ian Forster. I have a lot of classics on my TBR, and I used to read classics primarily both in school because I studied English and also for fun, just because that's what I thought I should be reading, and also I do genuinely enjoy them. So I'm trying to get back into reading classics, but this one just wasn't for me. I've actually seen the movie adaptation a long time ago and I don't remember it, but this was just really boring. There was no plot to speak of. I thought that all of these characters were going to be hanging out at this country house called Howard's End, but it mostly takes place in London. I didn't really feel connected to the characters. I did like the writing, but like literally there was nothing to keep reading for. Like there was nothing I needed to know. There was no plot that I needed to figure out what was going to happen. Like I was just very bored. So I decided to DNF it. I'm glad I did. Those are all the books I read in May. Let me know your thoughts on any of these, and I hope you have a lovely week. Subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me. Bye!